Hey, what's up YouTube? Welcome to another video here on the channel. Today we're going to continue the series where I take each of the weapons in New World and show you the best PvP build for them. And in today's video we're going to be covering the Warhammer. But before we get into the meat and potatoes, don't forget to hit the like button. Maybe leave a comment down below what you think of the video. All the constructive criticism helps. I've been replying to all the comments in the last one. It's going to help improve this one. And maybe consider subscribing and becoming a member if you really like the content here. All right, so like in the last video, we're going to hit Weapon Master. We're going to go to Warhammer. And before we start talking about all these perks and like abilities and stuff like that, I do want to cover something that I think is important because it's a little different from the Great Axe like last video. A lot of people do use the Great Axe as a primary. You know, it's probably the most used weapon in the game as a primary weapon. The Warhammer, on the other hand, isn't a very popular primary weapon. It is a very popular weapon, and I believe it's like the most powerful weapon in the game currently, right? But it is used as a secondary tool. It has a ton of CC, and it does do a ton of damage. It doesn't do as much damage, and especially as much AoE PvP damage as like a Great Axe. So Great Axe users use this as like a secondary. They pop a bunch of CC, they rend their opponents, and they switch to the Great Axe and slang, right? But I do want to talk, and specifically, I still think this is a good build if you are using this as your primary weapon, or even if you're using it as a secondary weapon. But the point is, I just wanted to cover that because a lot of people don't really use the Warhammer as a primary weapon, and I still want those users to understand that this is a good build for those who use it as a secondary as well, because I personally use it as a secondary, and if I was to switch a Warhammer primary, I would still use this exact same build. All right, so with all that being said, let's actually hop into the actual build. As a Warhammer user, you're probably going to be, like the Great Axe, a very tanky type of bruiser, type of damage dealer, or just like a full-on point tank, right? So the three abilities that I think are best useful for both of those categories is Wrecking Ball, Shockwave, and Path of Destiny. So you might be asking, why not Mighty Gavel and Armor Break and stuff like that? And just like how in the last video we wanted to hit Bloodlust on the Great Axe, we want to hit Aftershock on the Hammer. And when it comes to hitting the last perk or the major perk for either of the tree sides, you want to put more of the skills into that side. And you also want Crowd Crusher. It has a lot more CC tools, so that's why we have more of the points on that side and we have way less on Juggernaut specifically, right? But we believe that Wrecking Ball is a much more powerful ability than Clear Out, right? Because the thing is with Clear Out, it's good for making space and distance, and it deals damage. But the thing is, you want to keep people on you because you want to keep fighting, dealing damage, outputting more CC. And Clear Out is more of like a disruption push tool to kind of make space, and we don't want to be making space. We want to close the space. All right, so now that we've covered the three main abilities, let's talk a little bit about these side perks. And with all these side perks, you basically want to pick all the ones that amplify your kit, which is currently focused on crowd control. You'll pick stuff like Concussive Impact, where you deal 15% more damage against targets that are affected by Warhammer debuff. You'll pick Prevailing Spirit, which regains 35% of damage dealt as health when using a CC ability. Stuff like Acceleration, where you reduce Warhammer's cooldown by 7% when using light attacks against targets who are actively debuffed. Another good example is Exhaustive Attack. All Warhammer abilities apply Exhaust, slowing target stamina regen by 15% for 5 seconds. That's basically a debuff, and all your abilities will now apply it. Basically, the goal of the Hammer, or at least the build that we've come to agree upon in my guild, is that you're basically a CC god. You keep a target staggered for so long where not only you can deal a ton of damage, but you can have your mages and your teammates in the war just blast and blow them up. The Hammer is an extremely useful supportive tool, even to the point where we have our mages who are in full void bent running the Hammer as a secondary, just because it allows for such easy disengage. You drop a Shockwave and you just get out of there, or you literally just Wrecking Ball them all and get out of there, or you Path of Destiny and get out of there. You can basically just use any of these skills and just walk out, or even if you want to use Clear Out and walk out. It just creates so much crowd control that it makes it easy for you to just make decisions off of those crowd controls, because a bunch of people are just stunned around you. You can then choose to alert your teammates, say, hey, I'm about to rend everyone with my Hammer, and just everyone can turn around and start blasting on that area because they're all about to get rended. All right, so now that I've basically covered all the abilities and the perks, I kind of want to transfer over to what you should be using with your Hammer in terms of gear and stuff like that, and even your attributes. But before we do that, I kind of want to talk a little bit about the playstyle. We personally use the Hammer as like an engaged, disruptive, crowd control type of weapon because it has all of those capabilities, and we think that has the best at those capabilities in the game, as well as providing a good damage source. So I just want you guys to keep that in mind when you're going to make this build and when you're going to be using the hammer, just so you guys kind of have an understanding, because I didn't really cover the play style. All right, so with that being said, let's hit tab and let's talk about the armor I think you should be using with the hammer. And just like in the last video, you are using a great axe, you're a melee, and you're a melee tanky bruiser type of DPS character, or even a tank. Void bent, full void bent, get full void bent. Please get full heavy void bent. I don't know how many times I need to say this, but if you're a melee DPS or a tanky type of bruiser character, void bent, please. Okay. So now that being covered, let's hit K again. Let's go to attributes. So in my last video in the comments, someone said I had a bad take about telling people to go 300, 150. So me personally, I think the 300 strength passive is insane, right? Where you have crit on all heavy and light attacks constantly. And I think in wars where there's cannons and stuff pushing you around, grit is really important. But if you're full heavy, there's no way you can ignore the 200 con proc. And I think if you had to make a choice on how you would be playing it, I think that 200 con would actually be better. And even on it for a hammer user who's like also like more tankier, if you're a main hammer user than an axe user, you should probably be a 200 con. The goal is, just so you guys understand, my goal as a player, because I am a melee DPS tanky bruiser type of player in this game currently, that is to hit 300, 200. And it is possible with max stats to hit, like max proper stats to hit that. You can hit 300 and 200 with food and stuff like that prior to wars, or even leading like outposts, going into outpost rushes and stuff like that. You can hit those numbers, right? So the end goal is to hit 300, 200. But if you had to choose, I personally do 300, 150, but you can do 250, 200, which is another great option, right? I just like the grit passive on all my attacks because I think that getting bounced around and stuff like that really diminishes damage, right? But if you're more focused on CC and overall disruption and staying alive as a tank should, I would recommend 250, 200. All right, so let's switch over to full screen so we can put a little bow on this video. All right, so the first thing I want to say now that we're in the full screen is, first of all, thank you for all the love and support and all the content that I've been producing. Specifically, the last video has been a ton of people in the comments letting me know about what they think of the video, and I've been getting messages from friends saying, hey, you should try this, try that, and all this other stuff. Just keep leaving the feedback in the comments. I take all that information and I try to make better content off of it. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this Warhammer PvP build review type of thing, and don't forget to come check out the stream. I try to stream every single day from like 4 to 5 p.m. to like midnight. And before this gets too long, peace out, guys. See you in the next video.
Ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me if you feel like 550 on the 5 sticky, come get high with me, that's a deal, right? Ride with me if you ride with me, you can slide with me.